Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tezvav, Daf 15 from Masechta Moed Katan. Friends, Daf 15 we really just continue talking about things that a mourner is not, it's sort of the halachos of mourners, what they are and are not allowed to do. I guess more what they're not allowed to do. And then we compare that, we sort of group that together with people who are excommunicated and people who have tsaras, and we try to figure out what are sort of the restrictions that apply to these individuals. We started yesterday at the end of the daf by mentioning that mourners do not get haircuts, and now we are. So let's just jump in. The daf Tezvav begins by saying, "Menudin mitzoroid ma'im b'tispores." What about people who are excommunicated? What about people who have tsaras? Are they able to get haircuts? Tashma, come in here. Menudin mitzoroid. That excommunicated fellows and people with tsaras, asur l'saper l'chabes, are not allowed to get haircuts and are not allowed to do laundry. Menuda shemes, if you have a fellow who was excommunicated and he passed away, Bezdin soklin asarono, Bezdin stones his coffin. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, lo she'amidu alav galavanim ki galo shel ochon. Rabbi Yehuda says, now this does not mean that they pile upon the coffin, just tons of stones like they did by Ochon when he stole from the Cherem of Jericho. Rather, Bezdin just puts a big stone, one big stone on top of the coffin, to teach you that a fellow who is excommunicated and dies in excommunication, Bezdin Soklin Sarono, Bezdin puts a stone upon his coffin. Ovel chayv batifas arosh, a fellow who is in mourning, he must, wrap his head somewhere. Friends, I don't know. Who wraps their head? People wrap their heads, I guess, with stuff. I don't know. Sometimes, I think women wrap their heads too. Maybe men also wrap their heads. I don't know. They wrap their heads. What do you want me to tell you? Wrapping your head. Where am I again? So a person who's in mourning needs to wrap his head. And the fact that God said to Yechezkel, do not wrap your head or your mustache or something. So it means everybody else needs to wrap their heads and their mustaches. So what about an excommunicated fellow? Does he have to wrap his head? Rav Yosef Tashmas, says Rav Yosef, come in here. Says Rav Yosef that, when it comes to the fasts, right, people, if they need rain and they're fasting and they're not getting answered, they fasted 13 times and still nothing, so it's shver, and they sit there and they wrap their heads and they sit there like they're excommunicated and like mourners, until God has mercy on them. So what do you see? So we see that excommunicated people just sit around with their heads wrapped. So Amalei Abaye says, Abaye Dilma Menuda L'Shemaim Shiny D'Chomer, says Abaye, well maybe, there it's talking about people who have been sort of excommunicated by God, and maybe that's more stringent and that's why they wrap their heads, but maybe just a regular excommunicated fellow would not have to wrap his head. What about a leper? Does he have to wrap his head? Tashma, come in here, Vasofam Yaite, that, the pasuk says that if you have a fellow who has tsaras, it says Vasofam Yaite, he's got to wrap his head till his mustache, I guess. How does he see? Michal Shachai Batifas Arosh, Shmamina. So that means that he's got to wrap his head. Alright, Mitzaras wrap their heads. Ovel also laniach tefillin. So in Ovel, a mourner is not allowed to wrap tefillin. Okay. Midika lei. Rachman Yechezkel, from the fact that God says to Yechezkel, Percha Chavosh Alecha, that God says specifically to Yechezkel, I want you to wear tefillin as a mourner. Michad D'Chuliamo Aser implies that, everybody else who's not Yechezkel does not wear tefillin. Menuda Mahu B'tefillin. What about a fellow who is excommunicated? Excommunicado. Is that a thing? Excommunicado? Does he wear tefillin? Teku. We don't know. Mitzvah ma b'tefillin. What about a leper? Does he wear tefillin? Tashma, coming here about Tzarua and the fellow with leprosy. The Rabbos Kohen Gadol, to include a Kohen Gadol. Okay, Kohen Gadol can get leprosy like we learned at the end of the daf yesterday. Begadol of Yufrumim, and his clothing should be rended. It should be torn. And his hair should be sort of revealed. In Priya Ela Gidul Seyar, Div Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says it means that you should grow out your hair. Alright. Rabbi Kiva Omer says, Rabbi Kiva Nemra Havoye Berosh V'Nemra Havoye Bebeged. It says, right, V'Roshu Yeh Parua, and it says, Begadav Yehyu Prumim. So we see that it says Havoye, that they should be both by your head and by your garments. Ma Havoye Amur Bebeged Davar Shechutz Migufo. So just like when it comes to the garment, it's something that's external to your body. It's outside of your body. So also when it comes to your head, we're talking about something that is external to your head. My lava tefillin. And now the Gemara wants to say, so what's that thing that's external to your head? Tefillin. Tefillin is external to your head. Amar Papa lo akumtu v'sudra. Says Papa, no, it's not talking about tefillin. It's talking about your hat and your turban. All right. I guess they wore turbans. Anybody at Babylon Talmud wear turbans? I don't wear a turban. I just wear my Babylon Talmud cap. Yeah. I wear my Babylon Talmud cap. Pashit. Avel asu b'sheila shalom. Okay? A mourner is not allowed to say hi to people. From the fact that God says to Yechezkel that, be quiet. That Tafka, specifically the thing that God said to Yechezkel that he should practice of the Avelus things, that is, stay silent. So we see that a fellow who is a mourner does not greet people. What about a fellow who is excommunicated? So, can we say excommunicado? I don't know if it's a word or not, but it could be. It could be. Friends, do I have your permission to use it? Thanks. So if a fellow is excommunicado, so can he say hi to people? Amar Yosef, says of Yosef, Tashma Kaminero V'Sheila Shalom, that again, after 13 fast days, if we're not answered, so then we do not say hi to people, like people who have been abandoned from God. So, but again, Abai says maybe it's different when they're sort of excommunicado with God, because maybe that's more stringent and therefore they don't say hi to people, but maybe a regular excommunicado fellow, I don't know if excommunicado is working so good. We're just going to stick with excommunicated fellow. A regular excommunicated fellow maybe would be allowed to say hi to people. What about a fellow who's got leprosy? Can he say hi to fellows? It says that he needs to wrap up to his mustache. That is, lips should be zipped. Zo bazo. They should be, take a zipper and zip the lips. That he should be like a menuda, that he should be like a excommunicado. Like there, I feel like it works. So we'll just go when it flows. I'll do it. And like a mourner, and he's not allowed to say hi to people. So what do we see? So we see that when it comes to, so we're saying that a mitzora, he keeps his lips zipped, just like an excommunicado and a mourning fellow. And it says, he's not allowed to say hi to people. So we see that a mitzora is not allowed to say hi to people. So then why don't we then have our answer regarding the excommunicated fellow? That, right, we said, that he's like a menuda and like an ovel. So let's say that a menuda is also not allowed to say hi to people, because we had a machlokas between Abai and Rav Yosef. We weren't sure. So Rav Acha bar Pinchas and Shmei Rav Yosef Mikatoni Sha'asur. So Rav Acha bar Pinchas says the name of Yosef that it doesn't necessarily say specifically that a mitzora is asur like a excommunicado. Shehei kimunudav cha'avel katan. It says no, he should be like a excommunicado and a mourner. B'mile achranyasa, i.e., with regard to other things, v'asur nami b'sheila shalom. And also the mitzvah is also b'sheila shalom. additionally, but he's not necessarily saying that the menuda, that the excommunicado, is asur b'sheila shalom. He is just saying that the mitzora is in some ways similar to the excommunicado, but at least additionally, the mitzora is not allowed to say hi to people. Avil asur b'divrei Torah, a mourning fellow, a mourner, is not allowed to study Torah. From the fact that God said to Yechezkel, dom, I guess stay silent. Alright. Menuda ma'u b'divrei Torah. What about an excommunicated fellow? Is he allowed to study Torah? Rav Yosef Tashma, says Rav Yosef, come in here. Menuda, an excommunicated fellow, Shona v'shona lo, can teach, and they can teach him. Niskar, he can be employed, Niskar and lo, and you can be employed by him. Muchram, but if it's sort of one step further than that, a muchram, a cherim, that's worse than a nidur. Lo shona v'lo shonin lo, he may not teach, they may not teach him. Lo niskar v'lo niskar and lo, he cannot be hired, and you cannot be hired to him. But he can study by himself. That he shouldn't stop learning. He can make a small little store so that he can make just enough to live. So Rav says that a fellow who's in Chayrim, he can open like a little water stand in a specific market somewhere, enough that he can eke by a living, but nothing more than that for a fellow who's in Chayrim. Okay, so it sounds like somebody who's excommunicado is allowed to study Torah, study it, teach it. Mitzora ma'u b'divrei Torah. What about a fellow who has leprosy? Is he allowed to study the holy words of Torah? Tashma. So come in here. V'odaitem levanecha v'levnei vanecha. Let it be known to your children and to your children's children. The Einiklach. Yom Shamati l'fnei Hashem l'kech b'chorev. The day that you stood before God at Chorev on Mount Sinai. Malhalim be'emo v'yira b'reses uvzeya. Just like over there, it was sort of with like fear and awe and sweating and what's another word I can use? Trembling. Mikan Amru. From here they said Azovim ba'mitzorah uva'alei nidos. A fellow who's a zav, a fellow who's a mitzora, a fellow who slept with a nida. Mutarin likos ba'torah v'navim v'chsuvim. They're allowed to read Torah, Navi, Ksuvim, L'shanos b'medrash, b'talmud, ba'alachos, v'agodos. They can basically learn Torah, u'valekeri nasurin shmamino, but not a balkari, right? So kilu a balkari who became a balkari out of his own sort of more of his own volition. So then because of his own desires, so a balkari doesn't study Torah. However, these other examples, right, Zav, Zava, you want to say Mitzora as well, so they would be able to study Torah because it was sort of less in like their control, right? Because they're more Zav and V'ya Mitzorain, right? So we said that Mitzorain are allowed to study Torah because you could still say that Mitzora is in a situation of Ema, Yira, Reses, etc. Like sort of, so he became a Mitzora. What do you want me to tell you? But, sort of wasn't, sort of just having a good time. We say though, Ba'alei Nidos would be okay. That's a little more complicated because I guess that's volitional, but I guess he can go to the mikveh and then, even though he's still tameh, because somebody who sleeps with a nida has the same tumah to a large degree as a nida, but nonetheless, I guess he can go to the mikveh and then study Torah. Okay, fine. Where are we? Avel also b'tichboses. Avel is not allowed to. A mourner is not allowed to do laundry. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, "Vayishlach Yoav Tekoa." Yoav sent Tekoa vayikach mishom isha chachama, and he took from there a wise woman. Vayomer Elei, he said to her, "Hisabli na, mourn, please. V'livshina big day Avel, and wear the garments of mourning. Vatasuchi shemen, and don't put on any oils. Ve'ayis kiisha ze yomim rabim, and be like this for a bunch of days. Misabelas almeis, mourning for a dead person, so for a nifter. And therefore we see that when it says to wear the garments of mourning, what are the garments of mourning? Garments that haven't been washed. Okay. Menudin, mitzorain, people are excommunicated, people who are lepers. Mayim b'tichboses, can they do laundry? Tashma, kaminir menudin u'mitzorain asurin l'saper l'chabesh mamina. We learned at the top of the page that excommunicated people and Mitzorah people, leprosy people, are not allowed to get haircuts and they're not allowed to do laundry. Okay. Avel chayev b'kriya. So a mourner needs to rend his garments. From the fact that God says to the children of Aharon, Lo tiframu, do not rend your garments, implying that everybody else does rend their garments. Menuda ma'u b'kriya teku. Does a excommunicated fellow rend his garments? We don't know. Mitzorah ma'u b'kriya. Does a leper rend his garments? Tashma b'gadav yufrumim shum korayin shmamina. So, well, the pasuk says that his garment should be rended. So, there's your answer. Avil chayiv b'chviyas amita. A mourner needs to overturn his bed. Because Bar Kapara taught that the Eibishter laments and he says, I provided them with my likeness. Right, as it says, right, that the Eibishter created people in his likeness. And in their sins they have like overturned my likeness, so may they overturn their beds. Okay. What about excommunicatos and leperados? So do they have to overturn their beds? Take it, we don't know. A mourner is not allowed to do work. As the pasuk says, I am going to turn your festivals into mourning. Just like a festival, you're not allowed to do any work. Also, a mourner is not allowed to do work. What about a fellow who is excommunicado? So can he do work? Rav Yosef Tashma says, if Yosef, come in here. So when they said that, again in the context of the fast days, they fasted 13 times, weren't answered, so then they go into just sad mode and they don't do any work. So that's only during the day they don't do work, but at night they can do work. So, and similarly we find this by a menuda and an excommunicado and a mourner. So my lav akulu. So what do we see? So mistama, when it says that, it means that by all of the things of sort of this, all of these things about when they weren't answered by their prayers, so they all apply to menudas, excommunicados, including not doing any work. Lo ashaira. No, it's not talking about that. It's talking about the other things, but not necessarily not doing work. 1 second, somebody's yelling outside. I'm curious what he's yelling about. Alright, I just checked out the situation. It's a situation. I don't know exactly what's going on, but there's a police over there and everything. But I don't know, someone's yelling and screaming. It's distracting. What do you want me to do? Tashma menuda shona. So what do we say? So ve'evos ma'alav achulu lo ashayre. No, we're saying about the other things. Lav davke, that it's saying that a fellow who's excommunicated, it's not necessarily saying that he would be not allowed to do work. Yeah, the guy's still screaming. Tashma coming here, menuda shona v'shonin lo niskav niskayin lo shmamina. So we said that a fellow is excommunicated, so he's allowed to teach, and they can teach him. He's allowed to be hired, and you can be hired to him. So we see that he's taka allowed to work. It looks like I'm wearing earplugs, and the door is closed, and the windows are closed, and this fellow is really trying to distract me. It says, what about a leper, a leperado? So can he do melacha? We don't know. Avel also berchitza. A mourner is not allowed to wash up. He's not allowed to bathe, not allowed to wash up. The Pasuk says, "Vatasuchi shemen." Do not anoint yourself with oil. Berchitza b'chalsicha, and washing is included in anointing. Menudamau berchitza. Can a excommunicado wash? Rav Yosef Tashma. So Rav Yosef says, well, let's see. Kishamu aser berchitza lo amru ela kol gufo. When they said again by these people who are fasting and they weren't answered after 13 times. So when we say that they are not allowed to wash, lo amru ela kol gufo, that means they can't wash their entire body. But they can wash their faces, their hands, and their their feet. Mutter, that's allowed. And similarly, you find with an excommunicado, uve'avel, as well as a mourner, so doesn't it imply that the same thing by all things, including washing, and that would apply to a excommunicado? No, not necessarily. Okay, I mean, we keep on saying that, so I don't know then what it actually does apply to, but all right. Can a leperado, can he wash up? We don't know. Avel also benilas a sandal. A mourner is not allowed to wear shoes. From the fact that God says to Yechezkel that in your case we would like you to wear shoes. Also implying that everybody else, however, all other mourners should not wear shoes. Menudamau benilas a sandal. What about an excommunicado? Can he wear sandals? Rav Yosef Tashma says of Yosef, well, sandal. Again, when it comes to the fasters who weren't answered after 13 fasts, when they say that they don't wear shoes, that's only in a city, but on a path, on a road, they're allowed to wear shoes. How is this? When he goes out to on his journey, so then he puts on his shoes. When he comes back in the city, he takes them off. You find the same thing by an excommunicado and a mourner. All things apply to the excommunicado, including not wearing shoes. Lo ashara, no, it's talking about the other things, whatever those other things are. Mitzora ma b'nilas sandal teku. Can a mitzora wear shoes? We don't know. Avel also b'tashma shamita. A mourner is not allowed to engage in marital relations. The pasuk says, "Ve'inachim David is basheva ishto vayavo alel b'chad mei ikara aser." It says that after the period of mourning for Bathsheba's child that died, so the people are getting excited. Now the cars are honking. I don't know. Everybody's getting excited. What do you want me to tell you? I'm getting excited, but because of the Torah. Getting excited because of the Torah, because of Babylon Talmud. David is Basheva, Ishto Vayavo Alel. That David slept with Basheva, but after the period of mourning, not during it. Can an excommunicado engage in marital relations? Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef Tashma, come in here, Kol Osen Shanim Shayu Yisrael B'midbar Menudin Hayu. So it says of Yosef, well, all the years that the Yidden, for the 40 years that they were in the desert, they were had a status of excommunicados. V'shim shumitosein, and they had marital relations. Amalei Abai says to Rav Yosef, the kill. Oh, says Abai, but wait, maybe that was different in the case of the Yidden in the desert, because maybe that was a situation of being excommunicated to God, and maybe that's more lenient. That's where they were allowed to engage in marital relations. Kill? What do you mean more lenient for? Amar Tchomer. Abai, the whole time weren't you saying by the fast days that they're excommunicated to God and that's more stringent? Now you're saying it's more lenient? The fact of the matter is, Abai wasn't sure if being excommunicated to God is more lenient or more stringent. And therefore, either way you go, he's going to sort of be more stringent, essentially, right? If you want to say that they're able to. So either way you go, you can kind of rebuff it and say, so over here they're saying that, that maybe you should be allowed to have marital relations because the people in the midbar, maybe that was more lenient and this is more stringent. Maybe when we talked about, I don't know, for example, that they would wrap their heads, so they were saying maybe that's specifically because it was for God and it's more stringent. Maybe this is more lenient. It's kind of unclear which way to go. Mitzora ma'u b'tash mishamita, can a mitzora, a leper, a leperado, engage in marital relations? Tashma kamanir detanya, as we learn in the Brayso, v'yashim chutz lo halu, that he's got to sit outside of his tent. Now we had said that was the other day that I was talking about mitzora musgar, a fellow who's in quarantine. Asher kemenuda v'che'avel, that he's like a menuda, like a excommunicado, and like a mourner. V'aser, a mournerado, sure. Also b'tash v'shamita, and he's not allowed to have marital relations. Ve'eno halo ela ishto, and his tent is his wife. Shenemar lechem or loim shuvulachem lo alechem. That after Maimer Sinai, God says, okay, tell the people they can go back to their tents, and that means to their wives. Shmamina, so we see that a mitzora, a leperado, is allowed to, is not allowed, at least if he's a mitzora musgar, if he's in quarantine, trying to figure out if he has leprosy or not, so he's not allowed to have marital relations. V'nifshot nami lemenuda, maybe we should apply that as well to a excommunicado, right? As we said, right? Because it says, right, kemenuda u'cha'avel. So Amar Rav Huna Beder of Pinchas Mishmei Rav Yosef Mikatani Sha'asr. Says Rav Huna, the son of Rav Pinchas, in the name of Rav Yosef. Well, it doesn't say that it's forbidden like an excommunicado and like a mournerato. Rather, she'kemuda u'cha'avel, rather that he should be like a excommunicado and a mournerato. B'mila achran yasa, it's talking about other things, v'asur nami b'tashmish shamita, but also additionally a mitzora, a leperado, is forbidden to have tashmish shamita, marital relations. Avel enu mishaleach korbanosav, a mournerato. All right, I'll stop saying mournerato. A mournerato is not allowed to send his korbanos, so if you have a mourner, an avel, and he's got korbanos to send, he shouldn't send them. The Tanya, as the pasuk says, Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon shlamim, that they're called shlamim. Bizmachu shalim, v'lo bizmachu onin. That, right, there's a korban shlamim. Shalim means complete, full. When a person is whole, not when he's sort of mourning. Menuda maushi yishlach korbanosav. What about an excommunicado? Sorry, that's going to stay for at least for a little bit. We'll see. If maybe by tomorrow we're still talking about excommunicados, then maybe I'll leave you guys alone. But you're going to have to deal with me for the next few lines. Sorry. Well, you don't have to deal with me. You can just turn me off. You just turn me off. I won't be insulted. Just don't tell me. So if you have an excommunicado, can he sort of send korbanos to the Beis Hamikdash? Rav Yosef Tashma says, Rav Yosef, come here, kolosin shanim shal yisrael b'midbar menudin hayu v'shalchu korbanos. Well, all the years that the Yidden were in the desert, they were like excommunicados, and yet they still sent korbanos to be offered. Amalei Abaye v'doma menuda l'shmaim shani to kill. Abaye then says, yeah, but maybe it's different when you're excommunicated to God. Maybe it's more lenient. Kill, what do you mean more lenient? What do you mean? I thought you said it's more stringent. So, well, he's not really sure. So therefore, if you want to offer that a excommunicado is allowed to offer korbanos, maybe Abaye can argue that, maybe that was more lenient, but a regular excommunicado should not offer his korbanos. What about a leperado? Can he send his sacrifices? Tashma, come here. Titania, as we learn in the verse of Achri Taroso, Achre Prishosum in Ames. So after the pasuk there in Yechezkel is talking about Kohanim, and it says that once they are no longer touching a mace, so they become tamei, and then they have to wait 7 days. Shivas yom misprulo. So then they count 7 days. Elu zayni meisfiro. These are the 7 days they have to count of yom bo el kodesh, and then on the day that they then come into the Beis Hamikdash, el chatzar pnimis, to the inner courtyard, l'sharis bakodesh, to serve in the holy area. Yaakov chataso, you should bring his korban chadazo asir sa'efa shelo. This is his sort of tenth of an ephah offering. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, whereas Rabbi Shimon says bivo'o yakriv, that when he comes in, he can offer bisman shiroi levia, roi la'akrava, at a time when he's able to come into the Beis Hamikdash. That is when he's able to offer korbanos bisman she'eno roi levio, eno roi la'akrava. But if he's unable to come into the Beis Hamikdash because he's a what are we talking about, leperado, so then he would not be allowed to offer his korbanos. Well, friends, that was Daf Tes Vav of Masechta Moed Katan. We talked about mournerados, leperados, and excommunicados. That was basically, we're talking about all these different halachas about, I think really the practical area really for us is about mourning, right? That mourners don't learn Torah, mourners don't get haircuts, mourners have to wrap their heads until their mustaches. They can't have marital relations, they can't wash up, they can't bathe, they don't do laundry, right? All these things that a mourner doesn't do, and then we're trying to figure out what are the nafkamin, right? They don't wear tefillin. What are the nafkaminas for leperados and excommunicados? And anyways, friends, that was the 15 of Masechta Moed Katan. I hope you enjoyed. Bye, Barado.